Homily 28, Commentary on the Gospel of St. Matthew, by St John Chrysostom, translated by Sir George Prevost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Homily 28, Matthew 8, 23 through 34. And when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. Now Luke, to free himself from having the order of time required of him, saith thus: And it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples, and Mark in like manner. But this evangelist not so, but he maintains the order in this place also. For they did not all of them write all things in this way. And these things I have mentioned before, lest any one from the omission should suppose there was a discordance. The multitudes then he sent on, but the disciples he took with himself, for the others mention this too. And he took them with him not for naught, nor at hazard, but in order to make them spectators of the miracle that was to take place. For like a most excellent trainer, he was anointing them with a view to both objects, as well as to be undismayed in dangers, as to be modest in honours. Thus, that they may not be high-minded, because having sent away the rest, he retained them, he suffers them to be tossed with the tempest, at once correcting this, and disciplining them to bear trials nobly. For great indeed were the former miracles too, but this contained also in it a kind of discipline, and that no inconsiderable one, and was a sign akin to that of old. For this cause he takes the disciples only with himself. For as, when there was a display of miracles, he suffers the people also to be present, so when trial and terrors were rising up against him, then he takes with him none but the champions of the whole world, whom he was to discipline. And while Matthew merely mentioned that he was asleep, Luke saith that it was on a pillow, signifying both his freedom from pride, and to teach us hereby a high degree of austerity. The tempest therefore being thoroughly excited, and the sea raging, they awake him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. But he rebuked them before he rebuked the sea, because, as I said, for discipline these things were permitted, and they were a type of the temptations that were to overtake them. Yea, for after these things again, he often suffered them to fall into more grievous tempest of fortune, and bear long with them. Wherefore Paul also said, I would not, brethren, have you ignorant, that we were pressed out of measure beyond strength, insomuch that we despaired even of life. And after this again, who delivered us from so great deaths, signifying therefore hereby, that they ought to be confident, that the waves rise high, and that he orders all things for good, he first of all reproves them. For indeed their very alarm was a profitable occurrence, that the miracle might appear greater, and their remembrance of the event be rendered lasting. Since when anything strange is about to happen, there are prepared beforehand many things to cause remembrance, lest after the miracle hath passed by, men should sink into forgetfulness. Thus Moses also first is in fear of the serpent, and not merely in fear, but even with much distress. And then he sees that strange thing come to pass. So these two, having first looked to perish, were then saved, that having confessed the danger, they might learn the greatness of the miracle. Therefore also he sleeps, for had he been awake when it happened, either they would not have feared, or they would not have besought him, or they would not so much as have thought of his being able to do any such thing. Therefore he sleeps, to give occasion for their timidity, and to make their perception of what was happening more distinct. For a man looks not with the same eyes on what happens in the persons of others as in his own. Therefore, since they had seen all benefited, while themselves had enjoyed no benefit, and were supine, for neither were they lame, nor had they any other such infirmity, and it was meet that they should enjoy his benefits by their own perception, he permits the storm, that by their deliverance they might attain to a clearer perception of the benefit. Therefore neither doth he this in the presence of the multitudes, that they might not be condemned for little faith, but he has them apart, and corrects them, and before the tempest of the waters he puts an end to the tempest of their soul, rebuking them, and saying, Why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Instructing them also, that men's fear is wrought not by the approach of the temptations, but by the weakness of their mind. But should any one say that it was not fearfulness or little faith to come near and awaken him, I would say this, that that very thing was an especial sign of their wanting the right opinion concerning him. That is, his power to rebuke when awakened they knew, but that he could do so even sleeping, they knew not as yet. And why at all marvel that it was so now, when even after many other miracles their impressions were still rather imperfect? Wherefore also they are often rebuked, as when he saith, Are ye also yet without understanding? Marvel not then, if when the disciples were in such imperfect dispositions, the multitudes had no exalted imagination of him. For they marvelled, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the sea and the winds obey him? But Christ chode not with them for calling him a man, but waited to teach them by his signs that their supposition was mistaken. But from what did they think him a man? First from his appearance, then from his sleeping, and his making use of a ship. So on this account they were cast into perplexity, saying, What manner of man is this? Since while the sleep and the outward appearance showed man, the sea and the calm declared him God. For because Moses had once done some such thing, in this regard also doth he signify his own superiority, and that the one works miracles as a slave, the other as Lord. Thus he put forth no rod, as Moses did, neither did he stretch forth his hands to heaven, nor did he need any prayer, but as was meet for a master commanding his handmaid, or a creator his creature, so did he quiet and curb it by word and command only. And all the surge was straightway at an end, and not one trace of the disturbance remained. For this the evangelist declared, saying, And there was a great calm. And that which had been spoken of the Father as a great thing, this he showed forth again by his works. And what had been said concerning him? He spake, it saith, and the stormy wind ceased. So here likewise he spake, and there was a great calm. And for this most of all did the multitudes marvel at him, who would not have marvelled, had he done it in such manner as did Moses. Now when he is departed from the sea, there follows another miracle yet more awing. For men possessed with devils, like wicked runaways at sight of their master, said, What have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? For, because the multitudes called him man, the devils came proclaiming his Godhead, and they that heard not the sea swelling and subsiding, heard from the devils the same cry, as it by its calm was loudly uttering. Then, lest the thing might seem to come of flattery, according to their actual experience, they cry out and say, Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? With this view, then, their enmity is avowed beforehand, that their entreaty may not incur suspicion. For indeed they were invisibly receiving stripes, and the sea was not in such a storm as they, galled and inflamed, and suffering things intolerable from his mere presence. Accordingly, no man daring to bring them to him, Christ of himself goes unto them. And Matthew indeed relates that they said, Art thou come hither before the time to torment us? But the other evangelists have added, that they also entreated and adjured him not to cast them into the deep, for they supposed that their punishment was now close upon them, and feared, as even now, about to fall into vengeance. And though Luke and those who follow him say that it was one person, but this evangelist too, this doth not exhibit any discrepancy at all. I grant that if they had said, there was only one, and no other, they would appear to disagree with Matthew. But if that spake of the one, this of two, the statement comes not of disagreement, but of a different manner of narration. That is, I for my part think, Luke singled out the fiercest one of them for his narrative, wherefore also in more tragical wise doth he report their miserable case. As for instance, that bursting his bonds and chains he used to wander about the wilderness. And Mark saith, that he also cut himself with the stones. And their words too are such as well betray their implacable and shameless nature. For saith he, Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? You see that they had sinned, they could not deny. But they demand not to suffer their punishment before the time. For since he had caught them in the act of perpetrating those horrors so incurable and lawless, and deforming and punishing his creature in every way, and they supposed that he, for the excess of their crimes, would not await the time of their punishment, therefore they besought and entreated him. And they that endured not even bands of iron come bound, and they that run about the mountains are gone forth into the plain, and those who hinder all others from passing, at sight of him blocking up the way, stand still. But what can be the reason that they love also to dwell in the tombs? They would fain suggest to the multitude a pernicious opinion, as though the souls of the dead become demons, which God forbid we should ever admit into our conception. But what then wilt thou say, one may ask, when many of the sorcerers take children and slay them, in order to have the soul afterwards to assist them? Why, whence is this evident? For of their slaying them, indeed, many tell us, but as to the souls of the slain being with them, whence knowest thou it, I pray thee? The possessed themselves, it is replied, cry out, I am the soul of such a one. But this too is a kind of stage play, the devilish deceit. For it is not the spirit of the dead that cries out, but the evil spirit that feigns these things in order to deceive the hearers. For if it were possible for a soul to enter into the substance of an evil spirit, much more into its own body. And besides, it stands not to reason that the injured soul should cooperate with the wrongdoer, or that a man should be able to change an incorporeal power into another substance. For if in bodies this were impossible, and one could not make a man's body become that of an ass, much more were this impossible in the invisible soul. Neither could one transform it into the substance of an evil spirit. So that these are the sayings of besotted old wives, and spectres to frighten children. Nor indeed is it possible for a soul torn away from the body to wander here any more. For the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God. And if of the righteous, then those children's souls also. For neither are they wicked, and the souls too of sinners are straightway laid away hence. And it is evident from Lazarus and the rich man, and elsewhere too Christ saith, This day they require thy soul of thee. And it may not be that a soul, when it is gone forth from the body, should wander here, nor is the reason hard to see. For if we, going about on the earth which is familiar and well known to us, being encompassed with a body, when we are journeying in a strange road, know not which way to go unless we have some one to lead us, how should the soul, being rent away from the body, and having gone out from all her accustomed region, know where to walk without one to show her the way? And from many other things too one might perceive that it is not possible for a disembodied soul to remain here. For both Stephen saith, Receive my spirit, and Paul, to depart and to be with Christ is far better. And of the patriarch too the Scripture saith, that he was gathered unto his fathers, being cherished in a good old age. And as to the proof, that neither can the souls of sinners continue here, hear the rich man making much entreaty for this, and not obtaining it. Since had it been at all possible, he would have come, and have told what had come to pass there. Whence it is evident that after their departure hence, our souls are led away into some place, having no more power of themselves to come back again, but awaiting that dreadful day. Now, should any one say, And wherefore did Christ fulfill the devil's request, suffering them to depart into the herd of swine? This would be our reply, that he did so, not as yielding to them, but as providing for many objects thereby. 1. To teach them that are delivered from those wicked tyrants, how great the malice of their insidious enemies. Another, that all might learn how not even against swine are they bold, except he allow them. A third, that they would have treated those men more grievously than the swine, unless even in their calamity they had enjoyed much of God's providential care. For that they hate us more than the brutes is surely evident to every man. So then they that spared not the swine, but in one moment of time cast them all down the precipice, much more would they have done so to the men whom they possessed, leading them towards the desert, and carrying them away, unless even in their very tyranny the guardian care of God had abounded, to curb and check the excess of their violence. Whence it is manifest that there is no one who doth not enjoy the benefit of God's providence. And if not all alike, nor after one manner, this is itself a very great instance of providence, in that according to each man's profit, the work also of providence is displayed. And beside what hath been mentioned, there is another thing also, which we learn from this, that his providence is not only over all in common, but also over each in particular, which he also declared with respect to his disciples, saying, But the very hairs of your head are numbered. And from these demoniacs too one may clearly perceive this, who would have been choked long before, if they had not enjoyed the benefit of much tender care from above. For these reasons then he suffered them to depart into the herd of swine, and that they who also dwelt in those places should learn his power. For where his name was great, he did not greatly display himself. But where no one knew him, but they were still in an insensible condition, he made his miracles to shine out, so as to bring them over to the knowledge of his Godhead. For it is evident from the event that the inhabitants of that city were a sort of senseless people. For when they ought to have adored and marvelled at his power, they sent him away, and besought him that he would depart out of their coast. But for what intent did the devils destroy the swine? Everywhere they have laboured to drive men to dismay, and everywhere they rejoice in destruction. This, for instance, the devil did with respect to Job, although in that case too God suffered it, but neither in that case as complying with the devil, but willing to show his own servant the more glorious, cutting off from the evil spirit all pretext for his shamelessness, and turning on his own head what was done against the righteous man. Because now also the contrary of what they wished came to pass. For the power of Christ was gloriously proclaimed, and the wickedness of the demons, from which he delivered those possessed by them, was more plainly indicated, and how they want power to touch even swine, without permission from the God of all. And if any would take these things in a hidden sense, there is nothing to hinder. For the history indeed is this, but we are to know assuredly, that the swinish sort of men are especially liable to the operations of the demons. And as long as they are men that suffer such things, they are often able yet to prevail. But if they are become altogether swine, they are not only possessed, but are also cast down the precipice. And besides, lest any should suppose what was done to be mere acting, instead of distinctly believing that the devils were gone out, by the death of the swine this is rendered manifest. And mark also his meekness together with his power. For when the inhabitants of that country, after having received such benefits, were driving him away, he resisted not, but retired, and left those who had shown themselves unworthy of his teaching, having given them for teachers them that had been freed from the demons, and the swineherds, that they might of them learn all that had happened, whilst himself retiring leaves the fear vigorous in them. For the greatness withal of the loss was spreading the fame of what had been done, and the event penetrated their mind. And from many quarters were wafted sounds, proclaiming the strangeness of the miracle, from the cured and from the drowned, from the owners of the swine, from the men that were feeding them. These things any one may see happening now also, even many in the tombs possessed of evil spirits, whom nothing restrains from their madness, not iron, nor chain, nor multitude of men, nor advice, nor admonition, nor terror, nor threat, nor any other such thing. For so, when any man is dissolute, eager after all embraces, he differs not at all from the demoniac, but goes about naked like him, clad indeed in garments, but deprived of the true covering, and stripped of his proper glory, cutting himself not with stones, but with sins more hurtful than many stones. Who then shall be able to bind such a one? Who, to stay his unseemliness and frenzy, his way of never coming to himself, but for ever haunting the tombs? For such are the resorts of the harlots, full of much evil savour, of much rottenness. And what of the covetous man? Is he not like this? For who will be able ever to bind him? Are there not fears and daily threats, and admonitions and counsels? Nay, all these bonds he bursts asunder. And if any one come to set him free, he adjures him that he may not be freed, accounting it the greatest torture not to be in torture, than which what can be more wretched? For as to that evil spirit, even though he despised men, yet he yielded to the command of Christ, and quickly sprang out of the man's body. But this man yields not even to his commandment. See at least how he daily hears him saying, Ye cannot serve God and mammon, and threatening hell, and the incurable torments, and obeys not. Not that he is stronger than Christ, but because against our will Christ corrects us not. Therefore such men live as in desert places, though they be in the midst of cities. For who that hath reason would choose to be with such men? I for my part would sooner consent to dwell with 10,000 demoniacs than with one diseased in this way. And that I am not mistaken in saying this is manifest from their respective feelings. For these last account him an enemy that hath done them no wrong, and desire even to take him for a slave when he is free, and encompass him with 10,000 evils. But the demoniacs do no such thing, but toss their disease to and fro within themselves. And while these overturn many houses, and cause the name of God to be blasphemed, and are a pest to the city and to the whole earth, they that are troubled by evil spirits deserve rather our pity and our tears. And the one for the more part act in insensibility, but the others are frantic while they reason, keeping their orgies in the midst of cities, and maddened with some new kind of madness. For what do all the demoniacs so bad, as what Judas dared to do, when he showed forth that extremity of wickedness? And all too that imitate him, like fierce wild beasts escaped from their cage, trouble their cities, no man restraining them. For these also have bonds upon them on every side, such as the fears of the judges, the threatening of the laws, the condemnation of the multitude, and other things more than these. Yet bursting asunder even these, they turn all things upside down. And should any one remove these altogether from them, then would he know assuredly the demon that is in them to be far fiercer and more frantic than he who is just now gone forth. But since this may not be, let us for the time suppose it for argument's sake, and let us take off from him all his chains, and then shall we clearly know his manifest madness. But be not afraid of the monster when we uncover it, for it is the representation in word, not the thing in truth. Let there be then some man, darting fire from his eyes, black, having from either shoulder serpents hanging down instead of hands. And let him have also a mouth, with sharp swords set in it instead of teeth, and for a tongue a gushing fountain of poison, and some baneful drug, and a belly more consuming than any furnace, devouring all that is cast unto it, and a sort of winged feet more vehement than any flame. And let his face be made up of a dog and of a wolf, and let him utter nothing human, but something discordant, and unpleasing, and terrible. And let him have also in his hands a firebrand. Perhaps what we have said seems to you to be terrible, but we have not even yet fashioned him worthily. For together with these things we must add others besides. I mean, that he is also to slay them that meet with him, to devour them, to fasten upon their flesh. Yet is the covetous man much more fierce even than this, assailing all like hell, swallowing all up, going about a common enemy to the race of men. Why, he would have no man exist, that he may possess all things. And he stops not even at this, but when in his longing he shall have destroyed all men, he longs also to mar the substance of the earth, and to see it all become gold. Nay, not the earth only, but hills also, and woods, and fountains, and in a word all things that appear. And to convince you that not even yet have we set forth his madness, let there be no man to accuse and frighten him, but take away the terror of the laws and supposition awhile, and thou wilt see him snatching up a sword, laying violent hands on all, and sparing none, neither friend, nor kinsman, nor brother, nor even his very parent. Nay, rather, in this case there is not even need of supposing, but let us ask him if he is not for ever framing to himself such imaginations, and if he does not in thought range among all men to destroy them, both friends and kinsmen, and even his very parents. Nay, rather, there is no need even to ask, because in truth all men know that they who are under the power of this disease are wearied even of their fathers' old age, and that which is sweet and universally desirable, the having children, they esteem grievous and unwelcome. Many at least with this view have even paid money to be childless, and have maimed their nature, not only by slaying their children after birth, but by not suffering them even to be born at all. Marvel not therefore if we have thus sketched the covetous man, for in truth he is far worse than what we have said. But let us consider how we shall deliver him from the demon. How then shall we deliver him? If he may be clearly made aware that his love of money stands very much in his way in respect of this very object, the gaining of money. For they that wish to gain in little things undergo great losses. Whence accordingly a proverb hath been set forth to the same effect. Many, for instance, on many occasions, wishing to lend at large usury, and through the expectation of gain not having inquired about them who receive their money, have together with the interest lost also all their capital. Others again falling into dangers, and not willing to give up a little, have together with the substance lost their life too. Again, when it has been in men's power to purchase either gainful offices, or some other such thing, by some trifling meanness, they have lost all. For because they know not how to sow, but have ever practised reaping, they of course continually fail of their harvest. For no man can be always reaping, as neither can be always gaining. Therefore, since they are not willing to spend, neither do they know how to gain. And should they have to take a wife, the same thing again befalls them. For either they are deceived into taking a poor wife for a rich one, or when they have brought home one that is rich, but full of faults without number, here too they have incurred more loss than gain. For it is not superfluity, but virtue, that causes wealth. For what profit is there of her wealth, when she is expensive and dissolute, and scatters all abroad more vehemently than any wind? What if she be unchaste, and bring in numberless lovers? What if she be drunken? Will she not quickly make her husband the poorest of men? But they do not only marry, but also buy at great risk, from their great covetousness, laboring to find not good slaves, but cheap ones. Consider then all these things, for the words concerning hell and the kingdom ye are not yet able to hear. And bearing in mind the losses which ye have often undergone from your love of money, in loans, and in purchases, and in marriages, and in offices of power, and in all the rest, withdraw yourselves from doting on money. For so shall ye be able to live the present life in security, and after a little advance to hear also the words that treat on self-government, and see through and look upon the very Son of righteousness, and to attain unto the good things promised by him, unto which God grant we may all attain, by the grace and love towards man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and might for ever and ever. Amen. End of Homily 28.